This is the farm that I grew up on. It was a dairy farm in southern Wisconsin. It's 160 acres in a perfect square. And of course, the square of the property doesn't line up with the infrastructure, the roads and the old railway bed, but that is how the fields are divided. This is the right out front of the house that I grew up in, and I'm now walking on what used to be a dirt road that led to the fields, but it divides our property on the left from the neighbor's property on the right. And now I'm walking towards the first corner. And here you'll very clearly see that the property line cuts across the field while the field runs up to the old railroad bed. Now I'm walking into the slough, which was an area that was often too wet to farm, but on dry years we would plant a crop called sudex in there, which was a wet growing crop that could be chopped into silage and fed to the cattle. Now I'm coming out of the slough, and then I have to cross the railway bed again at an angle because that's the way the property cuts across it. And then you'll see on the other side, I'm now going to slice off a piece of this field. So to the left of me would be the home farm property, and to the right would be the neighbor's property. And now I'm walking into the swamp, which I'll go about 50 yards into this, and this is a super thick, wild area that almost no one ever goes into because it's wet and brushy and very difficult to walk through. But this is actually where the corner of the property is. This will be the second corner, and I will turn left here again. And that corner looks about like this. So it's very brushy, very wet, very wild. And then I have to cross the old railroad bridge again, which is now a bike path. And once I cross that, I go back into another swamp and a bog on the other side of it. And this is a very wet area, and I got pretty wet walking through here. But if you kind of dance on top of the bogs like this, you don't get as wet until you slip off and fall in. Now I've walked all the way through the bog, and I'm heading into a very brushy area, and I will need to cross a creek that shortly after here will enter a river. But I have to be careful not to get stuck in the mud here, so my first attempt doesn't work out, and I have to figure out another way to bridge that muddy patch there on that side of the creek. And so I'm able to use these branches from this brush in order to keep me on top of the mud and cross the creek. And then I walk through a small oak tree stand and come out along another small field. To the left again is the family's property, and to the right is the neighbor's. And then I've just made the third corner crossing the road, and you will see that once again the property line runs at an angle relative to the road. And so I'm across the road walking along kind of a prairie area, and then we'll head back into a swampy area along the creek again, which I have to cross back over. And at this point, you'll see there's an old billboard calling for volunteers for the local fire department. Now, I'm walking towards the creek again, which is a very brushy area, and I cross it right after this. And then I walk into a small hickory grove where we used to go as kids and pick up buckets full of hickory nuts to eat and share with the families. And then from here, I walk into a deeper woods and find old tires and concrete that was dumped there. And in the deepest part of this woods is the last corner. And here I turn left again and am essentially walking back towards where I started right about now. This woods was a very rich and bountiful place for raspberries when I was a kid, and we would come and pick those by the bucketfuls as well, and our mothers would make jam and pies and things. And now I'm on a driveway that divides the farm's property on the left from our neighbor's property on the right. And this is taking me back, and I'll need to cross the highway one more time, which I do here. And now I'm essentially back to the farmhouse that I grew up in and where this walk started.